came to you and was wanting to weed the garden, that was one of my big goals. Is I had this feeling and I didn't know exactly what I wanted the space for, but I had this feeling that things were overgrown.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Thailand podcast. As we're closing out 2023, what are you choosing to embrace? And what are you looking forward to welcome in 2024? This is usually the time of the year that we get quite reflective. And I thought I must invite a creative practitioner who is very intentional about her practice on the podcast to co-reflect with me about this past year and also share her experience running her own multifaceted practice. I have on the podcast today Erica. Erica is actually a client of mine. Through working with her this summer, I came up with a completely new program and offering for independent practitioners who have a link in practicing art and also have other links in providing other service and in her case, consulting and coaching. I can't wait to hear her insights on how to embrace the seasonalities of change in her practice and how to zoom into different corners of her garden. And that is the garden of her practice, her creativity, and her connection with nature. Erica has over 20 years of experience helping governments, cultural institutions, nonprofits, funders, philanthropists, and purpose-driven businesses to create transformative change for the people and communities they serve. She's a parent of 2 kids, a practicing artist, and works as a strategic advisor and coach to leaders in the social impact and cultural sectors. Without further ado, here's the conversation with Erica. Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Talent Podcast. Today I'm very excited because I have one of my clients, a fellow consultant and coach, fellow artist, and someone who I know have listened to the podcast regularly in the past year or two. Welcome, Erica, to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Betty. You know I am like a super fan of the podcast, so I feel very honored to be here.
Yeah, so I invited Erica because I thought like it's the end of the year and this is like the perfect time to do some reflection of the year together. And Erica and I, as you hear in the episode, like we work together through my Design Your Links intensive and we connected very well and we have a lot of shared values in terms of like how to conduct a business and our career. So, but first, I want to let the audience know a bit more about you, Erica. Can you tell us what you do and how you come to do what you do?
Yeah, it's a long story, so I'll make it short. I think everybody who has this like multifaceted stuff has the long story. But okay, the first thing I do is I'm a mom. I've got 2 little kids, they're 6 and 8, and so I always feel like that life of being a working parent is like a job unto itself. I'm an artist. I practice visual art and writing. I love printmaking. I love drawing. I have a quite a lot of thoughts around social practice art. So anyways, I love doing art. And then for money, because my art practice is still nothing more than a money pit, I work as a coach and a consultant. I serve as a strategic advisor to social impact organizations and the cultural sector. And this has taken me a little while to get to knowing what I actually do, but I do a lot of strategic planning, a lot of sitting with leaders and teams and kind of helping them untangle whatever is going on in their world and so that they can move forward in a way that kind of more aligns with where they want to be.
Yeah, amazing. Like the multifacetedness, we can hear that in your narrative. Can you tell us a bit more, like how you? Because I know that you transitioned from like being working in different roles in the nonprofit sector to having this multifaceted independent practice. What was the turning point?
Yeah, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was working in an executive director role for a provincial arts service organization. It was a really fun job. There were so many great things about it, working with art museums and galleries, and it was great. At the same time, at that time, I had a little baby and a toddler, and the executive director life was it was not working for me in a few different ways, right? It was pretty clear that that was not what I wanted to be doing anymore. So I decided to stop doing that. And so when I first started working, so I'm in my mid 40s now, and so I've been working for a while. I graduated with my undergraduate degree, a very lucrative English and art history degree in Victoria, which is like a pretty small place with maybe not a thriving job market. And so I had no job at all when I graduated, and yet I had to pay the rent. So I started freelancing with arts organizations. So I think when I was making the decision to leave my executive director role and what am I going to do next, and how can I kind of create the flexibility and freedom I was craving with my kids and my life and my art practice, which was pretty dormant at that stage. I was like, I know I can do this, right? Like I scraped together an income when I was 22 doing this. And so I knew I could do that. And so it was from there, it was just a kind of process of figuring out how to start. And so I started by taking 2 months off because I was also very tired and burnt out.
Yeah.
I took the summer off, and then I just started having coffees with people and thinking about, I think I was pretty clear about the impact that I wanted to make. And it was about what do I want to be working on and who do I want to be working with. And I just started reaching out, and again, lots of coffees, lots of just sending random emails out to people saying, I really like what you're doing. Do you want to chat? And that's pretty much what I still do. And it's great. I am so happy. It has developed in ways I could have never imagined. And it's been pretty straightforward and pretty nice.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, it's all there. I'm sure, like, you go like, wow, yeah, it's just one thing led to another. And
Yeah.
I still hear in that narrative that there's a lot of courage and permission that you gave yourself in terms of stepping to develop this independent thing. It can be fearful to try to go on your own. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think anybody who's kind of familiar with my career path will maybe notice that I'm not very afraid to change. So I think that that is maybe part of it. Like I've had lots of different jobs. I've spent short amounts of time working with organizations. I've spent long amounts of time working with organizations. And I think one of the things, like actually when I was reflecting on this question, I didn't spend very much time preparing for this, but I did reflect a little bit when you sent me the list of questions for the podcast. And one of the things that I've realized it before, but it made me think about it again, is like how much consulting work I was doing all throughout my career, right? Whether you're advising, like I spent a lot of time advising executives and political leaders on communications, for example. So there's like coaching, there's a consulting, there's a kind of working with people in the same way that I work with leaders and now. So there's also, I've always worked with arts funding agencies, and I've worked with a lot of kind of umbrella organizations. And within those, you always have tons and tons of organizations that are intersecting with that organization, looking for support, looking for a sounding board, looking for help. And so there's something that's so, that it feels so much the same, I guess. So in some ways, the work process, what I actually do, does not feel different at all. It just feels more like myself. There's less of the stuff maybe I didn't love as much about being in an organization, like admin, and that I can do it pretty well, but it's not my favorite.
It's not your favorite.
Yeah, so there's more of that kind of people side, which is what I love.
I really hear that strength, and I know we talked about it before, you being able to connect the dots and seeing the pattern spotting. And we'll come back to that. I want to delve deeper, a bit deeper of what you said. It's like, I'm someone that's not afraid to change. That's quite a big statement. And for a lot of people, I know that when they're thinking about changing their career, that's the first thing. It's like, I'm not a risk taker. Sometimes people have that kind of label for themselves. So I'm curious, like, what's your secret sauce when facing change?
Yeah, I think that practice makes it easier, right? I wouldn't classify myself as a risk taker at all. I'm one of those people, if you put me near any sort of amusement park and see you later, that's real risk.
Well, another commonality, I have it.
Like, but I think like in terms of kind of understanding what the risk actually is, right? I think there's the risk of, with things like practical things, like can I continue to feed my children and pay the rent. That's a pretty important risk. And so you can weigh that out and take a chance, take an educated guess, and put some guardrails in place to make sure that you've got the basics covered. But also, I feel like I've been so lucky in my career to be around so many, I kind of call them like believing mirrors. You know, those people who totally see you, they totally get you, they're behind you. They give you the space to kind of find where you're going. And I think that I've been so lucky to have that I feel like it's kind of become an embodied thing, right? Where I have had the practice of saying, like people in jobs, for example, saying, I don't know, go do whatever you think you should do. Go make this work. If it's a marketing strategy or if it's kind of producing an event or whatever it is, it's like exercise your vision. And so I think finding those people who see you and who kind of know what you're capable of and letting them kind of filter into your body, right? So that you can start seeing yourself like that as well. For sure, there's like tons of moments when I feel highly anxious and highly doubtful and, you know, all those sorts of things. But there is something that I do know I can do it, and I know I've done it before. So I think most people, if they reflect back on what they're capable of and they find those folks that believe in them, it's easier, right? If the basics are covered, you still do need to feed your children.
Yeah, I heard a couple of things there. There's amazing. Take calculated risk. Facing change is not just about taking risks. You need to have your base cover and be able to leap from there. And I love that phrase, believing mirrors. Is that what you said? Like I
Yeah,
might have to
yeah,
steal that. We need to like
it
print that
belongs.
on labels.
Not mine. I've stolen it for sure. I don't remember who.
Yeah, nothing is original.
I
But I
will. If
love
anyone,
that.
the
Yeah.
attribution.
Because I love that phrase because it's not just simply sometimes we talk about teachers, mentors. It's not doesn't necessarily need to be who wears what hat in our like career and life. It's like more the act that they do, which is holding space, see us, and allow us to then leap. Right? I love that. Yeah. One thing that I know you do, I really appreciate, and I think that was one of the things that we are connected on, is that your systemic approach and your system thinking in your work. For those of us who are not familiar with what it means to apply for a system thinking lens to consulting or just creative practice, can you tell us a bit more that aspect of your work?
Yeah, it's something that I feel is really important. It's pretty much the only thing I want to do anymore is kind of systems thinking and systems change work. So I think the easiest way to think about it, like you talked earlier or referenced earlier, like this connecting the dots thing, right? And so I think there is that thing, I think my unique brain, all my neurodiverse self is I'm a dot connector. My brain is connecting the dots. It does it by itself, and sometimes I do wish it would stop. But so I think people have a natural tendency to do that. A lot of the time, artists do for sure. But I think with systems thinking, it's how do we look at the whole picture, right? It's about seeing a whole instead of trying to look at little parts. And so one of the things, the easiest way to explain systems thinking and systems change is to think about the metaphor of a garden or a forest and the actual ecology of a forest, for example, right? You've got the trees, you've got the root system, you've got all those years of pine needles and leaves falling down and creating this beautiful soil. You've got all the cool mycelium and mushrooms under the surface. And so I think that that's the easiest way to think about it. There's a lot of fun complexity and theories and all that sort of stuff about systems change, but just think about going for a walk in the forest and you know that the forest knows what to do when a tree falls over in the forest. It's not always a bad thing, right? It becomes this lovely nurse log where moss grows on it and ferns start growing and you see these little tiny mushrooms and there's bugs everywhere eating up the good wood, good soft wood composty stuff. It's beautiful. And so I think if we can think more that way in our work about how we do exist in an ecosystem and how it affects us. And I think it's with systems thinking, I have last year I did this amazing, it was like this 7 or 8 month cohort program, this master class in systems practice with the beautiful people at the Systems Sanctuary. Shout out to them. And if anyone is interested in this, just run to their website. They're amazing. But there's so much good stuff there. And I think the biggest thing is if we can get ourselves into that mindset of thinking like a system, thinking like an ecosystem, understanding that everything is a system and it is interconnected and a whole. And you know me, I'm like a crazy garden lady. I love plants, I love nature. I would just plant things and dig things all day long if I could. And if we can think about what it means to have healthy soil and what we can think about what happens when we do different things to our system, it's the same thing in life. And so this mindset of kind of adopting curiosity, wondering, instead of trying to immediately fix little symptoms of maybe what's going wrong with a system, I think that's super important. And it's definitely something as I'm working with clients in my consulting practice or when I'm working with leaders and as a coach, it's really that piece around listening and seeing what's in the system. There's always some untangling. We sometimes use metaphors like that of untangling and what do you want to weave together next, right? Whatever's not working, let us untangle it. Let us kind of let it. A lot of the time, there's some good composting that needs to be done in terms of letting things go. And then, what then do you want to start exploring and in terms of changing your system? Systems exist at individual levels, at organization levels, at sector levels, at society levels, and we are just little bits of the universe as well as humans.
I love that you're embodying that garden metaphor in that system thinking aspect of your work. I agree with you. Looking at the ecological system is the best entryway to think about a system connected. One thing that shows up for me when you were describing it is that when you look at the nature, it's also not super rigid. Systems can show up, patterns can show up in a way that it seemingly looks random, but there are some connections there that when you pay close attention and listen, it does emerge. And those lexicon that you use, like the composting and reading, weaving, those beautiful ways of kind of encouraging your clients to think, like embody that mindset. So let me ask you, once you coach or guide your clients, whether it's nonprofit leaders and other clients, to embody this system way of thinking, what shifts do you see?
Yeah, it's lots. I think first of all that people are not as stressed out, that they are ready instead to do that. And I think some of the stuff I've seen with organizations that are going through big transitions, or if a new leader comes in and they're really trying to rejuvenate the organization or rebuild it, is that usually there are quite a few problems that are blocking the system, right? And so I think that less reactivity, more observation and responding is something I really see people doing. Instead of kind of things feeling like everything's on fire, I start to ask questions or be more curious. One thing I love, which I've experienced with several of my clients, and the way I work with people is I usually get in pretty deep with them and they get to know me and I'm showing up in their world and overhearing stuff and all that sort of stuff. I really love, there's been a few moments, one client in particular I'm thinking of, where we talked a lot about having an abundance mindset. They were really, when we first started working together, really trapped in that feeling of scarcity, right? Like scarcity in terms of staff challenges, right? Like retention and people feeling maybe frustrated in their roles for various reasons because of some of the organizational change that was needed. And also things like money, right? Feeling like there's not enough money around. And we really worked hard on this idea of having an abundance mindset and having an impact mindset in terms of the impact that you want to create in the world for the community that you're serving, and how that scarcity mode, which is kind of like our lizard brain, right? It's that fight or flight mode.
Yes.
It's not at all helpful for solving problems, right? The people that we work with in the social impact sector and nonprofits and the cultural sector too, some of them are working on like the most complex and difficult problems in the world, right? Like trying to address these big things. And so you need your best brain to do that work. And so I love when I see clients saying things like, oh, I think scarcity is creeping into this conversation. I think we're just reacting right now, and we should
Right.
really step back and think about impact and what we're trying to do here. Or if they're from a funding perspective too, like if they're asking questions about how their funding agreements are structured. That stuff is huge, right? Instead
Mm-hmm.
of just, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough money. What is the system of your revenue? What is the system of your expenses? How is that all going together? How can you work with funders in a collaborative way to address the shared interests that you both have in terms of making an impact in the community?
I love that you are able to pick up those cues. And I know you shared with me before that when your client says certain lines like, is scarcity creeping into this conversation? It gives you, as the coach and the consultant, the cue that, oh, wow, something is shifting
Yeah.
around. And it's like beautiful moment. As like a fellow coach, that you kind of pick up those signs from a client. Yeah, we've been talking about kind of helping organizations in adopting this system thinking mindset, but I can't help but to think the parallel about artists also adopting this mindset in their career. And I know you've talked about like adopting, thinking ourselves as a system, like individuals, especially as, well, just in general, everybody thinking of their career as a system, then people as a system. Which brings me to talk a bit about our work together back this summer. Wow, time has fly. And I remember you come to me and you need a little bit of reading of like what to focus on. You know what the impact that you want to make, but there's some kind of sorting and clarifying that was needed. Maybe tell the audience a bit more of your intention when we started working together. What was needed? What support were you looking for?
Yeah, I think first let me just say it was like a little oasis working with you. I
Oh.
can expand, but it was wonderful. So I did come into our engagement feeling like, yes, I need to do some weeding. So one of my whole goals in kind of working independently and managing my world myself instead of just showing up and there's a paycheck and a job and all that sort of stuff, I wanted to have the flexibility and freedom in my working life to do the things that were really important to me, whether that is taking a morning off to go on a field trip with my kids or really working on some of the kind of issues in the art sector and in the social impact sector that I feel are pretty pressing needs. And so I think for me, I've been so lucky to have a pretty supportive community around my work. I've been, not that it's always been perfect, but I've always had lots of requests for people wanting me to do work to help them. And I've got a pretty diverse skill set. And so I can do a lot of things. But I'm learning that just because I can do a lot of things doesn't mean I should do everything. Right. And so there were definitely, I think there was something first of all of just having way too many things on the go, right? Like it's a capacity thing. Am I actually working within my capacity? Probably not, right? Probably doing more than is beneficial. And so there was a little bit of that of just like projects come and projects end. And so sometimes you just let things finish. So there was that. But I think also getting much more clear about how I want to spend my time, right? I am in a place in my practice where I can be a bit more picky and I can choose who and what I want to spend my time on. One of the things I find as a parent and as somebody who has a multifaceted practice and lots of different ideas and things I want to do, is like there's only so much time for consulting work and also my energy levels. There's some work that totally lights me up that I could do all day that absolutely fuels me. And then there's other work that is draining. I wanted to get a lot more specific about what those things were and putting some fences around the draining stuff. Sometimes that stuff is important and it's necessary, and we can't all escape. There are like documents to be built and spreadsheets to be made and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, having some fences around things so that I can protect my energy and get more specific about what I want to do so that I can have the impact that I want to have and so that I can do all the life stuff that I want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. And to share with the audience. Essentially, now it's like on my website it said that it's the design your links intensive, but it was because of you that I designed that program because we connected very well. And I was like, wow, yeah, it seems like the performance program is usually through which I support people to make a career transition. That's not the issue here. The issue is really the challenge that you face with facing this multifaceted practice. And may I say this, you're not alone in this, because since I've worked with other creatives with that for the program too, people who sometimes have distinctive links, like in your case you have the consulting and coaching work, but within that there's also different offers that you are serving clients, and then you have the artistic practice and you're a mom. They're like, when you think about how you want to use your time, and I remember you saying to me, I can foresee that this practice is not going to go away anytime soon. I want to have a practice that's sustainable. And how do you design intentionally around those guardrails and fences? And we channel a lot of that lovely garden metaphor of like, what are we weeding out and what are we growing and strengthening? So then tell us from your perspective, what were some of your takeaways and from the program, and since working together, what have you implemented?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that was really helpful, like you mentioned earlier, that I do have quite a variety of offers in terms of things that I do, ways that I work with people when I'm doing a consulting engagement. And I loved one of the things, like kind of riffing off that garden metaphor that we used with my weedy garden that I brought you to talk through. We talked a lot about seasons of work, right? Where there might be some seasons where it's taking on a big project that's intense, where you're really working with some longer term stuff, where maybe the workload itself is higher. And then we talked about seasons where it might be less focus on a single big project and more focus on kind of a few different things and working with clients one-to-one and stuff like that. So that was really helpful for my brain and my kind of approach to my work, of just having that, again, it's like that systems thing of just like reframing something in your head so that it looks different to yourself, right? That you can have all these disparate parts, but just like, I don't know, I'll go back and use my garden metaphors, but just like
Yes.
right now, I'm not growing anything in my vegetable patch. It's November, or it's cold, right? There's a bunch of leaves on top
Yes.
of there so that the worms can like digest the soil and do their thing, right? So, but it comes spring, I'm going to be planting my garden. There's going to be tons of stuff growing, and so having those periods of rest where I don't really think about certain parts of my work, right? I'm not working on that sort of stuff. That's been huge for me, just that mental shift that I can let some of those things go and know that they'll come back around when the season is right. That's been huge. I think the other thing that was totally a surprise to me when we were working together that I wasn't expecting, you did such a beautiful job of creating this supportive container and creating space for me to spend time with my own vision for my work with a believing mirror. We talked about that earlier, this believing mirror, but it's not easy to find. I've worked with other people who are like, Erica, your ideas are too varied and too many, but you were helping, like, you were creating that beautiful space, and that's quite an art and a skill. But one of the things I was totally not expecting was the level of synthesis that you helped me with my work, right? Right after that first, I can't remember if it was a morning or an afternoon, but that kind of like first half day session that we had, you came back with this like gorgeous thing, this artifact that I still refer back to, that was like filled with all these beautiful garden images, and it just felt so much like me. And I know that I never would have gotten to that place by myself, right? It was fantastic. And again, I think it was just like that ability to have somebody reflect back to you what you were trying to say and to do some synthesis on your behalf to maybe make it a little bit simpler and more appealing even to myself. Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm so energized by this. So yeah, and there's lots of things I've changed for sure that are more kind of practical things, but there's that feeling, that experience, that kind of knowingness that I was able to kind of have that time with myself by working with you. And then, of course, now we have this beautiful relationship that is blooming in the garden. I love it.
I love it. Yeah, I want to kind of respond to a couple things that you said, like the seasons of change. I had this synchronicity moment. I was like, oh, because I just recorded a solo episode, which will be aired just before your episode, talking about how if we're not careful, creative fulfillment sometimes get put aside. The episode's focus is about like kind of 5 things to know about self-employment, and that's one of my observation. And one of the things that I share on the episode as myself is like I'm choosing to embrace different seasons. I just have a different engagement with my creativity. And it's something that I would have never, I think that I change as well, like on my own. Like that, I think sometimes we are kind of very hard on ourselves and say at every given moment we need to be attending to every
Mhm.
single plant in the garden.
Yeah.
And like you said, even when we come up with that like metaphor for you, it's helpful for me too to think about like, oh yeah, sometimes this season is about this is booming, the other season this is booming, and as humans, that's how we interact with nature. How else would we interact like with our own work? That's just the flow of things. So I think that it's so glad. I'm so glad to hear you reflect back to me, and I'm definitely seeing that like true, not just in your practice, in my practice, and there's some kind of universal application in that. And yes, the like, I'm forever going to steal that phrase, "believing mirror." That's what I find helpful when co-designing that program with you, and since I've adopted with other clients, is to reflect back to you in an artifact like a synthesis in a visual way, so that to see what more comes out. And then in our experience, we saw lots came out, and that metaphor of the garden. I mean, it goes on until now. Maybe this moment, we are still kind of adopting it, and I think it speaks to what you're saying that sometimes what we need is not necessarily like there's the practical strategies that we need, but we also need like a different way of looking at things as a whole, and a
Mhm.
different way of breaking things apart. And in my experience, even when I get coached, that's how I kind of like that make those micro adjustments that sometimes we can't even articulate. It's just a behavioral change, and that for me is what motivates me as a coach as well to help others and yourself. Well, I know that when this episode air, it's going to be one of the last episode for the podcast, and that was the intention of inviting you here to co-reflect with me. I'm curious, as the year closes, and we are embracing and welcoming another year. What are you choosing to lean into at this moment, and what are you looking forward for the new year?
Right now, or maybe a season where I'm working a lot on my own work, which is pretty exciting, right? Like I'm
Ah,
still doing, of course, I still have real, or not real work, but I am supporting others through my coaching and consulting work. But there's like, I also have this whole new stream of stuff that's happening that's like opportunities in my own art practice and my own creative practice. And so that has been really nice. So I think I've noticed when you were talking about the seasonality stuff just a minute ago, I was thinking about times in my garden where it's if the strawberries are growing, I'm really going to be focused on the strawberries. I'm going to be focused on, first of all, oh my gosh, I have these horrible squirrels in my yard and they eat all the strawberries. So I need to have my squirrel defense going, and I'm going to restructure my morning so that like I'm out in the garden picking strawberries with my kids because my goodness, that is the time, right? And so I think right now I'm a little bit focused on my own work, right? I just like working in different rhythms. I have I'm part of a group show right now here in Victoria that's at one of the local artist run centers, and it's like, oh, I just noticed myself doing little different things, right? It's like I had to carve off time from work to drop off my piece to the show and then having a chat with the folks at the gallery and then going to the opening and all those types of things. And that piece that I have in that show is part of a series and it's connected into some really cool research work that I'm involved in with some fascinating academics. And so it's taking on a life of its own. I'm writing grants for myself about it. And so I think that that is cool, right? So it's like right now, this in the garden that is my career, it's like I'm spending some time carving out time for my own work. And that is really fun. And I know that I will maybe have a different season in the year ahead where I know there's a big project that I'm hoping to do in the springtime that's around systems change with like our Vancouver Island arts ecosystem here. There's lots of folks that are working on that, and so we have this project that we've compiled together, and I know that there's a period of intensity there that if we move forward with that I'll be working hard, and I will not be paying attention to dropping off stuff at the gallery and toddling around like the art supply store or whatever. But so yeah, I think that thing about looking to the year ahead and feeling excited about my own work, because I think that's the thing that when I came to you and was wanting to weed the garden, that was one of my big goals. Is I had this feeling and I didn't know exactly what I wanted the space for, but I had this feeling that things were overgrown, that there was too much growing in too much of a haphazard way, and that it wasn't me making intentional decisions about what was growing, right? And we cannot control nature, and my career is very organic and I want to let it grow and thrive in unexpected ways. But I also want to be deepening my roots in terms of what the work that I really want to be doing is. And so it's fun to see that. I can see how the space that I cleared out as you know, some of the work that we did together and how it's played out since, it has created room for new things to grow and things that I have planted without even sometimes totally understanding what I'm planting. But yeah, so that I'm very excited about that. It's pretty cool.
It makes me so happy to hear that this season you're focusing on your art and your own work. Because I also remember that that was one thing that you worry about, is that so much focus on the client work. Sometimes you forget about yourself and your creative fulfillment in that mix. I would be remiss not to ask, when you are, because we talk so much about your consulting and coaching side, when you are a practicing artist, what form of art do you practice? Tell us more. Like, what is this upcoming show that you participate in?
Yeah. Okay. So my practice is still fairly varied. I am like a dedicated dabbler and very attracted to different mediums. But mostly, well, I shouldn't say mostly, but I do a lot of printmaking. I love printmaking. I love like any form of, I'm doing an art class right now. It's a drawing class and it's really fun, and we're getting together every week. And every time the drawing teacher brings up, we're working with all these different materials, and she's always like, "Oh, Erica, this is like a printmaking thing, and you can use oil pastels in this way to do printmaking." And so I love printmaking. There's a process thing that happens with printmaking where there's lots of steps and there's lots of variations of materials and ways that you can kind of make imprints and create images. So I love that. I also do some textile work. I like hand stitching, and so anything that's process based I really like. And so some of the work that I'm working on right now, I've been really fortunate. There's a group here on Vancouver Island where I live that's called Creative Coast BC. And they are not an organization, it's a collaboration lab. And so I've been working with them over the last 6 months or so as an advisor, but more as like a conspirator or a co-collaborator. And they brought me into this really interesting project with Simon Fraser University with these like brilliant computer scientists. And we're working on all this stuff related to data and data visualization and looking at data and how it's used. And so it's part of that is we're working with artists and data, and what does that mean? And so I have a whole little body of work that I've been working on as an artist, as well as kind of advising on this research project that's about data art, right? And so I've been having lots of fun. I have this project that is related to the amount of time that I'm spending on Zoom, which is not my favorite medium, and so I'm doing data embroidery on, I have one, I don't have an actual thing, I could show you one, but like, I'm using little panels like this. I have lots of these kind of linen type things. And so just stitching and like, so embedding some thoughts and data into different, sometimes I'm secretly doing data embroidery while I'm meeting with people. So hopefully my
Data
clients,
embroidery. You have to teach me when.
well, it's a very fun.
Oh
I'm
my god.
cool like workshop thing I want to do in the new year. But
It
yeah,
must be very meditative.
yeah, this is the thing I really like about art. Art is I can sit down and meditate. I'm pretty good with that, especially if I can be outside. but I like art practices that are meditative. When I hand stitch, I love that. When I'm in a studio doing printmaking, walking back and forth between a table and a press, and you're inking stuff, and then you're taking it over to the press and pulling off a print, it's extremely meditative. And I found during the pandemic, when I was dealing with the kind of challenges of being a working mom of two little kids and trying to run my business from home with no school and no childcare and all that sort of stuff, I started renting a studio in Victoria and just like going off there. And I was absolutely my reset time, my meditation time, my mental health time was like, yes, I was making art, but I was helping my brain and myself to heal through that and deal with that time, which was traumatic for all of us, or at least difficult for all of
Yes.
us. So, yeah, I think I'm a big art as meditation person. It's a great pathway into meditation.
Yeah, and I love that the art making it serves you as a human being, and then we also has beautiful connections with for consulting work and advisor work, and that's that system of the garden that we're talking right
Yeah,
there.
it's totally the system. I think the more I integrate my coaching and consulting work and the work that I do as kind of an arts professional or as somebody who works in social impact spaces, the more I integrate that with the kind of quality of attention and presence that art requires and that you get trained, that you get practiced in, and just like meditation is a practice, I think paying attention in the way that an artist does is also a practice. The more that those things get closer together and more integrated, the better it is for everybody. I really feel that that's been a big shift that's been opened up by this choice to move out of working in an organization to working with organizations and having an independent practice. Like that integration has been possible. And I think I show up in a completely different way than I did before. And I'm much more effective as a coach and a consultant and a systems change practitioner than I ever would be if I didn't have an art practice.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah. So, as I said, this is one of the last episode of the year. I have given you the fun question of asking me back a question in the episode. What are your curiosity about me as we close out the year?
Yeah, well, I know you're going to be spending some intentional time traveling, like using the intentionality that you've so beautifully built in your own practice to take some time away. I'm really curious about kind of what you're, because I'm such a fan of your podcast, I'm really curious about if you have podcasting plans for when you're away, or maybe you're just going to record a bunch of stuff beforehand and enjoy your travels over in Asia. But yeah, and I'm super curious to hear what your practice looks like for the year ahead and things that you're excited about.
I had like an intention that this is the end of year reflection episode we do together, but just listening to you drawing those connections is inspiring me to think what are we choosing to embrace and I am I choosing to embrace in the new year. But first of all, for the podcast, thanks for asking that question. It's a mix of both. It's a little bit of planning ahead. There's like a few episodes that I've kind of will pre-record before I go, just knowing that location uncertainty. I would know where I am, but this environment of recording. But I'm also open to, and I'm hoping actually, I would say that I'm hoping that I will be recording episode from when I'm working remotely to share my reflection, but also maybe guests from overseas when I meet there. Because one of the things that like I kind of so believe this move to work with remotely, I want to explore the world beyond North America, especially in the last couple of years that working in the pandemic. Sometimes I have this existential question. It's like, ooh, I know so much about the Canadian nonprofit arts landscape, but I go travel and I talk to someone, and it's like a completely different world outside. Some commonality, of course, but I'm having that itch to explore the stories outside, so that I hope that I can bring that perspective to the podcast as well. And that's another, it's double ups for my practice, which is one, I think it's both like a deepening and a widening move as I sort of like this season, for example, I'm doing another like level of coaching training as I deepen my skill sets and craft as a coach. I'm also kind of curious what are other perspectives out there, what are other clients, what are creative facing in. I'm going to Asia. What are they facing in Asia? I want to do some deep listening of meeting people, and I have to be honest, sometimes that feels like a crazy move because things are going well in my day-to-day in here. But that kind of adventure, I think deep down also crave. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. I love what you said about like deepening and widening. I think I've been thinking a lot lately about what it means to take up space and allow some of our maybe unarticulated hopes and dreams or instincts or energies to take up some space, like to have some room to grow. And I'm so excited. I think to hear travel is so, it does all those things, right? It is like a dot connector. It allows you to see
Yes.
things in ways that you didn't see them before. And oh, I'm so excited for you. And I think I said this to you, I think maybe by email, of like, I don't know if you ever plan to have kids, and don't feel like you don't have to.
Hmm.
I will never ask anyone that question, but as somebody who's a mom and glued to the basketball schedule, it's like, oh my goodness, take the freedom to go traveling.
Well, that's just it. Like, it's one of those things that, like, my partner and I look at each other. We are very lucky that we are self-employed, and if we think about future possibility of life, and we are like, I think this is like our kind of like freedom gap to do something out of the box. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Erica, for coming on the podcast today and share so much rich insights and kind of the perfect message to our audience about the seasons of work, system thinking, raising your garden. That's just like a beautiful message at the end of the year. And if people want to connect with you and check out your work, talk to you, check out your art, where do they find you?
Yeah, I have a LinkedIn profile. I have an Instagram profile. I'm not very active on social media. I maybe should be more, but Erica Mattson. So I'm sure you'll put little links in. But I love hearing from real people. Like I get so tired of hearing from the spam people. So if anybody just send me just a hello, so they can not be all those messages. I get excited. It's like, oh, message. So yeah, I love hearing from people. I love collaborating. It's pretty much what like the main source of my work is collaboration work, and so I like to know who's out there and who else is doing interesting work, and I love to hear from people. And one thing I was going to mention, I'm going to
Yeah.
start this little workshop in the new year. We've been talking, my friends at Creative Coast and I, we've been doing a lot of noticing about how much help people need with grant writing and things like that.
Mm.
And so we're starting this new little club thing. We're calling it Friends Don't Let Friends Write Grants Alone. And so I don't write people's grants anymore, just in case anyone is wondering. That has been weeded out of the garden.
Need
And
it.
I have enough of
Yes.
my own grants to write, but I will gladly sit with other people and help them conceive of their grants or look at their grants or whatever. And so I'm gonna start this little, I don't know if it's like a gathering or whatever, so that we can write grants in a more friendly way together and support each other. So I'll post about that in the new year or sooner. If people want
I
to
love that.
write
I love
grants.
that title.
Yeah,
It
it's
captures so well the isolation that we can feel
yes,
in a grant writing mode.
precisely. It's like that thing of writing grants by yourself late at night alone in
Not a thing. Like something
despair.
that's very common, but not a thing that anybody likes. Yeah.
Let's try a different way.
Yes. I love that. All right. So thank you. And I mean, if one thing that I think people can hear loud and clear from this conversation is that you love real connection
Yes,
and that
real.
relationship aspect. So we'll leave your linking profile and other links in the show notes. Thank you again, Erica,
Thank
for
you.
being here. I will connect in 2024. I hope you enjoyed this conversation I had with Erica. As I listened to her sharing her insights, I was getting a lot of inspiration and also ways of thinking about my own practice. As I plan to travel and work abroad in the upcoming season, I'm also choosing to embrace what is most important to me this season, which is giving myself the grace to explore, adventure, and embrace uncertainties. I hope you are doing the same with your own practice and asking yourself what are you choosing to lean in at the end of the year? And what's one aspect or one thing that's priority as you come back for 2024? If you are looking for support for thinking more intentionally and design the lanes of your multifaceted practice, I have a coaching intensive program, the program that Erica and I talk about during this episode, that's specific for creative in that link. You can check it out on my website and book a consultation call with me for late January. As well, to close out the year and welcome the new year, I have a very special planner tool that's now released. It's called A Better Bucket List for Independent Creative Practitioners. And it looks into the different dimensions of an independent practice and asks questions to provoke you to think better as you think about your goals and planning for the new year. Again, I'll leave the link in the show notes and you can check it out. It's only for $15. You get the full planner and also a video guide to walk you through as you implement that planner in your planning. Thank you so much for listening today. As always, your presence is what makes this podcast possible. Truly, it fuels me to continue to explore and have this kind of conversation with creatives. And through this podcast, I get to meet amazing creatives such as Erica herself and have deep conversations. I'm so grateful for you as I close out the year. This will be the last interview episode that you hear from me for 2023. We will of course have the mini-show with Erica next week. And then we have another surprise episode to close out the year officially. I won't tell you what it is yet. You have to watch out for that. Then after that, we'll come back in late January to kickstart the year. So thank you for your support this year. If you like the podcast, as always, share it with your friends or leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts. We are also always looking forward to hear your feedback. May the end of year be restful, peaceful, and fruitful for you as you reflect back on your wins and give yourself that space to daydream and hold that presence for all the things that exist in your world. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.